Hey, let's gather around the table this morning. It's good to see you today. First things first, I'm really glad the Browns took a tackle last night because they really needed one badly. But that's not why we're coming today. I'm going to be in John chapter 20 again. We're talking about Peter primarily, but we're talking about people, again, who saw Jesus come back from the dead. In John chapter 20, it's interesting because all of us have a different faith journey, belief journey, So here you see it, right at chapter 20 here, Mary Magdalene is going to the tomb and she can't find Jesus' body. So she runs to Peter and John. She says, hey, Jesus' body is gone. They've taken him away. So Peter and John run to the tomb. And it says that John the apostle will outrun Peter, but he won't go in the tomb. Runs, beats Peter, but stops at the entrance. But Peter goes in. Then it says in John chapter 20, verse 8 says, finally the other disciple, John, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. That's all it took for John. He saw that Jesus' body was gone. He didn't need any more evidence, no more questions answered. I don't know, I have found myself that for most of my life, I've always believed. I've come to understand in my head and in my heart that God does exist. And I've had people share things with me, and those things have been so helpful. But for the most part, I've just chosen to believe. Now, in the next part of John 20, it's Mary, and Mary Magdalene is very distraught because she can't find Jesus' body. And it's interesting, she's looking for his body, and Jesus is there. Jesus is right there, and he says to her, woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for? And she thinks Jesus is a gardener. So she says to him, sir, if you've carried him away, please just tell me where you've put him and I'll get him. And John says, Jesus said to her, Mary. He just said her name, Mary. That's all it took. And she's like, oh my goodness. In Aramaic, she calls out Rabboni, which means teacher. All it took for Mary was to hear Jesus' voice. Now I know, wouldn't that be nice for us? Wouldn't that be great if you and I could hear Jesus' voice? Well, that'd make a big difference, would it not? But the fact is, every single time you break open the Word of God, you break open the Gospels, every single time you read the words of Jesus, you're hearing his voice. When Jesus says to us, go into all the world and make disciples, that's his voice. When Jesus says in John chapter 16, when he says, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but I've overcome the world. Those are Jesus. That's Jesus' voice. Those are his words, and we can take comfort in that. Now, there's 12 apostles. One is dead. Judas hung himself. There's 11. Jesus appears to 10 of them, but the 11th isn't there. Thomas isn't there, and Thomas is adamant. I will not believe in Jesus until I see, the hole in his hands and the big old, hole in his side. And then it happens. It says in verse 26, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them, though the doors were locked. And Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you, shalom. It says, then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas did. He looked and saw. Look at his hands, look at Jesus' hands, look at his side. He did. Jesus says something really remarkable for all of us. In the next two verses, he says, blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. There are a lot of things in this world I've never seen, but I believe that they exist. And I have absolutely no doubt, 100% convinced, that Jesus Christ lived and died. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take you now to it's the book of John. So we're in Gospel of John right here. But when we go to the letters of John, so here, this is interesting to me because you're talking, Jesus will resurrect in AD 30, and John will write the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Revelation around 80, 85, 90. So it's 60 years. John will continue to believe and trust in Jesus Christ for 60 years. No matter what's going on, persecution, struggles, difficulty, he'll be exiled to the island of Patmos. He'll keep believing. And he just says this at the beginning of 1 John 1. He says, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, that which we've looked at and our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. John saw Jesus. They touched Jesus' hands. They saw that he had a physical, resurrected body. And once they saw that, everything changed in Peter's life and in John's life. And they're like, nothing's going to separate us from the love of Christ. And I want you and I to know, no pandemic, nothing in all in this world can separate us from the love of Christ. We know he exists. We know and we believe and trust in him. I don't know what criteria you have for the God that you worship in this world, but my God, my criteria is that he had to come back from the dead. Believe and trust in him. If you do, the promise of Jesus is that you'll be blessed. Have an awesome day.